Hey everyone! Today we're going to continue learning about fictional narrative writing. Let's begin with our learning target. I can write a fictional narrative story. Now let's go ahead and review what we discussed about yesterday, the difference between a personal narrative story and a fictional narrative story. We wrote about personal narrative stories back in the first quarter of school. A personal narrative story is a story that tells about something in your life. It could have been a time, an event, an experience, or a person in your life. It is a true story from your life. So a personal narrative story is not made up. It happened to you. It might, like I said earlier, it might be about someone special in your life, an experience that you went through, a trip that you took. The author of a personal narrative story is you. I cannot write a personal narrative story about you going to Disney World because I did not go there. A personal narrative story would be about something that I've been through in my life. And your personal narrative story would be something that you've been through in your life. So remember, a personal narrative story is true and it is about your life, you and your life. But we've already written that genre of writing. Now we're going to move on to fictional narrative. Well, we know that a narrative is a story. Fictional means that it's make-believe or not real. So a fictional narrative story is a story that is make-believe. It's not real. It is an imaginative story that's not true. That means it's never happened before. Now, a fictional narrative story could be realistic. That means it could happen in real life, but it hasn't. Or it could be unrealistic. That means it may have some magic in it, it may have dragons, it may have talking animals. Those things can't happen in real life, so that would be an unrealistic fictional narrative story. These stories are written strictly to entertain the reader. They're not going to teach us any facts. They're not going to tell us a true story that actually happened or some true events that actually happened. A fictional narrative story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Usually has a problem and a solution, and it's make-believe. It is not true. Today, we are going to begin planning the characters in our fictional narrative stories. Now, before you can begin planning your characters, you need to decide, is your story going to be realistic or is it going to be unrealistic? For example, is it going to be about people like us? Then that would be a realistic story. Is it going to have unicorns or dragons or talking animals? Then that would be an unrealistic story. So that's the first thing that you need to decide. Okay, so today for your writing lesson, we are going to complete a character planning sheet to help us as we go through this week. We're going to plan the characters, the setting, the problem, and then once we get all of that information planned out, then we'll be ready to write. So today we're only focusing on the characters. So the first thing I want you to do is when you get this planning sheet in Seesaw today, I want you to decide, am I going to write a realistic fiction story, one that could happen in real life, that it's just make-believe, or am I going to write an unrealistic story that has unicorns, talking animals, something that could not happen in real life? You decide what you want to write about. I'm going to go with realistic, and I'm just going to make it up. I'm going to circle this just so it helps me remember that I'm going to write a realistic story. Now, once you decide if your story is going to be realistic or unrealistic, next you need to think about your main character. I want you to decide, are they human? Are they animal? Are they something else, like a talking cow? What is your character's name? How old are they? What do they look like? What are they interested in? What are some other traits that describe their personality or how they act? Go ahead and think about this. Now, I'm going to, since I'm doing realistic, I'm going to be looking at some humans like me. So I'm going to have a little boy in my story named Cody. Cody is an 8-year-old boy, and he's very adventurous. That means he likes to go on adventures. He loves to read, and he prefers to read books about animals. So I've told you my character's name, Cody. I've told you how old he is. He's 8. I've told you what he likes to do, go on adventures. He also likes to read books, and he really likes to read books about animals. So I've told you a little bit about my character. Now, I'm just making this up. This is not true. This is just a made-up character, okay? So when you get into Seesaw in just a few minutes, I want you to come up with your main character. Are you going to have a princess? Is your main character going to be a mom? Is your main character going to be a football player? My main character is going to be a little 8-year-old boy. You choose what you want to write your fictional narrative story about. Now, when we are writing fictional narrative stories, usually the stories don't just have just one character. That would kind of be a little bit boring. Usually there are other characters in the story that help tell the story. Those are called secondary characters. That means they're in the story. It's just not, the story's not all about them. See, my story is going to be all about Cody. But there's going to be some other characters in my story as well that I need to help tell the story. Now, some of these characters, these secondary characters might be friends to Cody. Some of them might be enemies. A really good, juicy story usually has some sort of enemy in it, some sort of problem or challenge. So let's go ahead and plan out these secondary characters as well. Now, I've got 3 secondary characters in my on my planning sheet. You might just have 1 extra character. In addition to your main character. You might just have 2. You can have 3 as well. I wouldn't go with more than 3 right now since this is our first story. So let's focus on your main character, and then you can have up to 3 secondaries, which would be 4 total. If you just want to have your main and 1 more secondary, that is fine. I'm going to go with 3 though. The first secondary character is going to be I'm going to have a little boy in my story named Alex. He's going to be Cody's best friend, and he's very shy. My next secondary character is going to be Sarah. Sarah is a friendly zookeeper who works in a petting zoo. Now, we already know that Cody likes to read about books. So now we've got his best friend, Alex, and we've got a lady at the zoo who is a zookeeper named Sarah. And lastly, my third secondary character is going to be Mr. Larson. This is Cody and Alex's 2nd grade teacher. So I've got Cody, my main character, Alex's best friend, Sarah's going to be working at the zoo as a zookeeper, and then Mr. Larson is going to be Cody and Alex's 2nd grade teacher. So I'm up to 4 characters. Now, as you start writing your story, if you come up with more characters, that is fine. But let's go ahead and get kind of like just our main idea right now of just get your brain thinking, what do you want to write about? Who do you want in it? Now, I'm not telling a story here. All I'm doing is planning my characters. So that's exactly what I want you to do today. You're going to head over to Seesaw, and you're going to get the same exact character planning sheet that I just completed. You can use your text tool, and I want you to circle whether or not you're going to write a realistic or unrealistic story. Then I want you to type in your main character box some information about the main character in your story. Their name, how old they are, what are they interested in, give me some adjectives to describe them. And then at the bottom for secondary characters, I want you to tell me who are some other animals or characters or people in your story that's going to help tell the story. Remember, I have Cody as my main character, Alex is his best friend, Sarah is a zookeeper that works at the petting zoo, and then Mr. Larson is also going to be in my story. He is Cody and Alex's 2nd grade teacher. Now remember, this is fictional. I'm just making this up. So as you start planning your characters, it's just fictional. You're just making this up. This is not anything that ever happened to you or anyone you know. You are coming up with characters for your fictional narrative story. Happy writing!